The war had lasted 12 years. 12 years of burning ships, dying soldiers, and planets turned to ash. The Valanthi Empire had never known defeat before the humans came. They were tall, beautiful creatures with silver skin that glowed softly in the dark. Their eyes held light, like captured stars. For 10,000 years, they had conquered every species they met. They believed the universe belonged to them. Then they found Earth. The humans should have been easy to defeat. They were small, soft, and lived short lives. They had no natural weapons, no claws, no armored skin. The Valanthi laughed when they first saw human soldiers. How could such weak creatures stand against the masters of the galaxy? But the humans did not fall. They fought in ways the Valanthi did not understand. They hid in shadows and struck without warning. They built machines that thought faster than any living mind. They refused to surrender even when surrender was the only logical choice. Year after year, the war continued. The Valanthi won battles but could not win the war. The humans lost millions but always found more soldiers willing to fight. After 12 years, both sides were exhausted. The Valanthi Emperor, a being so old he remembered when his people first touched the stars, finally agreed to peace talks. But peace between empires is never simple. Words on paper mean nothing without trust, and trust must be built with something stronger than words. The Emperor offered his granddaughter. Kalith Vorn stood before the Council of Matriarchs and listened to her fate. She was to marry a human. She was to live among them, learn their ways, and bind the two species together with her blood and honor. If she bore children, those children would carry both Valanthi and human heritage. They would be living proof that peace could last. She did not protest. Kalith was a daughter of the Empire, raised to serve her people above all else. If her marriage could end the war, she would pay that price gladly. She had seen too many death lists, too many families broken by loss. Let it end, she thought. Let me be the bridge that stops the bleeding. She expected to marry a human general. Someone important. Someone worthy of an imperial daughter. The humans would surely send their finest warrior, a man covered in medals and glory. Someone the Valanthi could respect even if they could not love. The humans sent Danny Cole. Kalith first saw him through a viewing screen as his shuttle approached the neutral station where the wedding would take place. He was not tall. He was not impressive. He wore a simple gray uniform with no decorations. His hair was brown and slightly messy. He smiled at the camera like a man arriving at a friendly dinner. Not a diplomatic marriage that would shape the future of two civilizations. She turned to her attendant, Sirith, and spoke in their private language. This is a joke. They mock us. Sirith, who had served Kalith since childhood, studied the human on the screen. Perhaps he is a great warrior in disguise. My lady. Humans are known for deception. He looks like a farmer. Perhaps human farmers are dangerous. Kalith did not laugh. She felt cold anger building in her chest. The humans had won their war through stubbornness and tricks. And now they insulted the Valanthi by sending this. Nobody. This small, soft, smiling man with dirt under his fingernails and kindness in his eyes. The wedding ceremony took place in the Great Hall of Horizon's Edge, a space station built in neutral territory. Representatives from both species filled the room. Valanthi stood tall and proud in their ceremonial armor. Humans wore their formal black and white clothing that Kalith thought made them look like servants. Danny Cole walked toward her without fear. That surprised her. Most aliens trembled when they stood before a Valanthi matriarch. Even humans who had fought bravely in battle often grew nervous in the presence of her kind. But Danny looked at her with calm, curious eyes. He seemed genuinely interested in her, as if she were a fascinating book he wanted to read. The ceremony combined traditions from both cultures. Kalith spoke the ancient Valanthi vows, promising to honor the alliance with her life and legacy. Danny spoke simpler words. He promised to be kind. He promised to listen. He promised to try. The word irritated her. Valanthi did not try. They succeeded, or they died. There was no trying. When the ceremony ended, Danny turned to her and spoke quietly so only she could hear. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know I'm not what you expected. But I promise I'll do my best to be a good husband. Whatever that means to you. She stared at him. His voice was gentle. His words were sincere. He meant every syllable. She could see it in his face, in the soft lines around his eyes, in the way he held his hands open at his sides like he had nothing to hide. Why did your people send you? She asked. You are not a soldier. You are not a leader. What are you? He smiled, and the smile was somehow sad. I'm an engineer. I fix things. I build things. I volunteered for this program because I thought maybe I could help build something good. He paused. I'm also from Nebraska. Small town. Lots of corn. Not much else to say. Really. Nebraska. Corn. Caliph had no idea what these words meant. She filed them away for later research. The Valanthi do not build, she said coldly. We conquer. Danny nodded slowly. I know. But maybe that can change. Maybe that's what peace is for. She turned away from him without responding. She would fulfill her duty. She would live among humans and honor the treaty. But she would not pretend to respect a people who sent farmers to marry their princesses. That night, alone in her quarters on the station, Caliph looked out at the stars and wondered what weakness had made humanity choose peace. They had fought the Valanthi to a standstill. They could have demanded better terms, asked for territory, insisted on reparations. Instead, they sent her a man who talked about corn and smiled like the war had never happened. She did not understand. But she was determined to learn. 3 months passed on the colony ship Evergreen. Caliph learned many things about humans, and none of them made sense. The Evergreen was a massive vessel that carried 10,000 humans through the border territories. It was part military station, part floating city. Families lived here. Children ran through the corridors, laughing and screaming. Old people sat in the garden sections and watched plants grow. The ship hummed with life in a way that Valanthi vessels never did. Valanthi ships were quiet, disciplined. Every crew member knew their place and their duty. They spoke only when necessary. They trained for combat even during times of peace. A Valanthi warship was a weapon, and weapons do not laugh. The Evergreen laughed constantly. Caliph watched from a distance as humans lived their strange lives. They ate together in large groups, sharing food from common plates. They told stories and made jokes she did not understand. They touched each other freely, putting hands on shoulders, hugging, even kissing in public. Such displays would be shameful among her people. Affection was private. Weakness was private. You did not show others what lived in your heart. But humans wore their hearts on the outside. They cried at sad news and laughed at good news. They grew angry quickly but forgave even faster. They seemed to feel everything more intensely than Valanthi. Yet they did not see this as a flaw. They celebrated their emotions like treasures. Danny was the strangest of all. He worked in the engineering section, deep in the belly of the ship where the great engines hummed. Every morning he woke early, kissed Caliph on the forehead whether she wanted him to or not, and went to his work. He came home smelling like machine oil and metal. His hands were always dirty. He smiled like he had spent the day doing something wonderful instead of crawling through maintenance tunnels. What do you do down there? She asked one evening. Today I fixed a water recycler, he said happily. The filters were clogged. If we hadn't caught it, the whole section would have lost clean water in a week. And this makes you happy? Of course. 10,000 people need that water. Fixing things that help people makes me happy. She did not understand him. Among the Valanthi, engineering was servant work. Warriors fought. Leaders commanded. Builders and fixers were necessary but not honored. Danny treated his work like a sacred calling. He brought her gifts. This confused her most of all. The first gift was a flower. He had grown it himself in the hydroponics bay. A small purple plant with soft petals. It reminded me of the color of your eyes when you're thinking hard about something, he said. The second gift was music. He gave her a small device, loaded with thousands of human songs. I don't know what kind of music you like, he admitted. So I put everything on there. Classical, rock, jazz, folk songs from places that don't exist anymore. Maybe you'll find something you enjoy. Rome. The third gift was a bird. Not a real bird, but a small wooden carving he had made with his own hands. It sat in his palm, delicate and perfect. Every feather was carved with care. He had spent weeks making it during his rest hours. We don't have birds where I'm from, Calith said, holding the carving up to the light. I know. That's why I wanted you to have one. Everyone should know what birds look like. She kept the carving on the shelf beside her bed. She told herself it was simply a cultural artifact worth studying. She did not admit, even to herself, that she thought it was beautiful. The weeks passed. Calith observed everything. She watched Danny play card games with his friends in the mess hall. He lost more than he won, and he laughed about his losses. She watched him help a young technician who was struggling with her work. He spent 3 hours teaching her, patient and kind, never once growing frustrated. She watched him sit with an old man whose wife had recently died. Danny said nothing. He simply sat beside the man and let him cry. Why do you do these things? She asked later. The old man is not your family. The young technician is not your responsibility. You gain nothing from helping them. Danny looked at her with something like confusion. I gain everything. They're my people. We take care of each other. That's what humans do. She reported her observations to Cirith, who still served as her attendant and confidant. I have married a species of farmers and craftsmen, Calith said. They play at being soldiers, but their hearts are soft. They care more about card games and flowers than glory and conquest. Cirith listened carefully. And yet they fought our empire to a standstill, my lady, through tricks and stubbornness, not through true warrior spirit, perhaps. But the dead do not care how they died. Our soldiers are just as dead whether they fell to warrior spirit or farmer stubbornness. Calith dismissed this with a wave. Danny is a good man, in his weak human way. But he is not what I expected. He is not what I deserve. She did not know that Danny was walking past their quarters at that moment. She did not know that he heard her words through the thin walls. He stopped, stood still for a long moment, then continued walking, without making a sound. That night, Calith noticed something she had never seen before. Beneath Danny's workbench sat a small metal case, locked and dusty. It looked old. It looked heavy. Danny never opened it, never spoke of it, never even looked at it. What is in that case? She asked. Danny's face changed. Just for a moment. Something hard passed behind his eyes. Then he smiled, and the hardness vanished like it had never existed. Old memories, he said softly. Nothing important. He changed the subject quickly, asking about her day, offering to make her tea, filling the silence with gentle words. Calith let him redirect the conversation, but she did not forget the case, or the look in his eyes when she mentioned it. There was something hidden inside her husband, something he kept locked away. She wondered if she would ever discover what it was. The attack came without warning. Calith was eating breakfast in their quarters when the first explosion shook the ship. Her tea spilled across the table. The lights flickered. Alarms began to scream, filling the air with their terrible sound. Danny was already moving. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the door. We need to get to the emergency stations. Now. What is happening? Before he could answer, the ship's communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in perfect Valanthi, and Calith felt her blood turn cold. Attention, human vessel. This is Commander Draxus Vorn, of the True Empire Fleet. Your pathetic peace treaty is over. We have come to cleanse this sector of human contamination and reclaim what belongs to our people. Draxus, her cousin. The one who had spoken against the treaty in council. The one who called her a traitor for agreeing to marry a human. The one who believed peace was surrender, and that the war should continue until every human was dead. The matriarch Calith will be returned to proper Valanthi custody, Draxus continued. All humans aboard this vessel will be executed as enemies of the Empire. Resistance is pointless. We are already boarding your ship. End quote. We have been new 40 part. The communication ended. The alarms kept screaming. Danny's face had gone pale, but his hands were steady. He led Kaleth through the corridor, moving fast but not running. Around them, chaos erupted. Crew members shouted and pushed past each other. Children cried for their parents. The ship shook again as another explosion struck somewhere in the distance. Danny, Kaleth said, you need to leave me. Draxus wants me alive. If you stay with me, you will die. I'm not leaving you. This is not heroism. This is stupidity. You cannot fight Valanthy warriors. You are an engineer. He said nothing. He just kept moving, guiding her through the maze of corridors toward the evacuation section. His grip on her arm was firm but not painful. She noticed that he knew exactly where he was going, even though the emergency lights had turned everything red and strange. They turned a corner and nearly ran into Cirith. The attendant was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but her eyes were sharp. My lady, the main escape pods are blocked. Valanthy boarding parties have taken control of that section. How many? Danny asked. Cirith looked at him with surprise. It was the first time the human had spoken to her with authority in his voice. 20 soldiers. Perhaps more. Elite warriors in full combat armor. Danny nodded slowly. His jaw tightened. There's a secondary evacuation route through the maintenance tunnels. I can get you there. You know the maintenance tunnels? Kaleth asked. I know every inch of this ship. He almost smiled. I'm an engineer. Remember? They moved through narrower passages now, away from the main corridors. The sounds of fighting grew louder, then softer, then louder again. Somewhere on the ship, humans were dying. Kaleth could hear the distinctive sound of Valanthy plasma weapons and the sharper crack of human guns. The humans were fighting back. Of course they were. They always fought back. They reached a junction where 4 passages met. Danny stopped, listening. His head tilted slightly, like a hunter sensing prey. Kaleth had never seen him like this. Every muscle in his body seemed coiled, ready. They're ahead of us, he said quietly. 6 of them. Maybe 7. Blocking the path to the secondary pods. Then we find another way, Cirith said. There is no other way. Not from here. Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Valanthy voices spoke in harsh commands. They were coming. Danny turned to Kaleth. His eyes met hers, and she saw something there she had never seen before. Beneath the kindness, beneath the gentleness, there was steel, cold, hard steel that had been hidden so carefully she never knew it existed. Stay here, he said. Both of you. Don't move until I come back. What are you going to do? Kaleth asked. He didn't answer. He turned and walked toward their quarters, moving fast. Kaleth wanted to call after him, to tell him he was being foolish, but the words died in her throat. She heard him enter their room. She heard the sound of something heavy being opened. The locked case. The one he never touched. The Valanthy soldiers appeared at the far end of the junction. 7 of them, tall and terrible in their black armor. Their weapons glowed with deadly light. They saw Kaleth and Cirith, and the leader smiled. There she is, the traitor princess. Lord Draxus will be pleased. Kaleth straightened her spine. If she was going to be captured, she would not show fear. She was a daughter of the Empire, even if that empire had become something she no longer recognized. The soldiers moved forward. Their boots rang against the metal floor. 20 steps away, 15, 10. Then the lights flickered, and Danny Cole stepped out of the shadows. Kaleth did not recognize him at first. He wore armor now, scarred and worn, the kind of armor she had seen on human special forces in combat footage. In his hands he held weapons she did not know the names of. His posture had changed. His face had changed. The soft engineer was gone. The man who stood before her now was something else entirely. The Valanthy soldiers stopped. They stared at this small human who had appeared from nowhere, armed and armored like a warrior of legend. Walk away, Danny said. His voice was flat and cold. Take your ships and leave. I'm giving you one chance. The Volanthi leader laughed. One human against 7 of the Empire's finest? You are brave, little creature. But bravery is not enough. Quote, Danny's expression did not change. I warned you. The leader raised his weapon. He never fired. What happened next was so fast that Kaleth could barely follow it. Gunfire erupted, sharp and precise. Bodies fell. The corridor filled with smoke and the smell of burning metal. She heard screams, cut short. She heard the sound of bone breaking, then silence. Danny stood alone among the fallen soldiers. 7 elite Volanthi warriors lay dead or dying at his feet. He had not received a single wound. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were filled with something she finally understood. Sorrow. Come on, he said quietly. We need to keep moving. Kaleth had seen Volanthi warriors train since childhood. She knew what combat looked like. She knew the ancient forms, the ritual stances, the beautiful deadly dance of blade and plasma. Volanthi warriors fought with pride. They announced themselves before battle. They gave their enemies the honor of knowing who would kill them. Danny fought like nothing she had ever seen. There was no pride in his movements, no announcements, no ritual. He moved through the ship like smoke through cracks, like water finding the lowest path. He did not stand and face his enemies. He appeared from shadows, struck without warning, and vanished before they could respond. More Volanthi soldiers waited in the corridors ahead. Danny dealt with them one by one, or in groups. It did not seem to matter. He used the ship itself as a weapon. He knew where every junction was, every maintenance hatch, every blind corner. He led the soldiers into traps of his own design, then ended them quickly and without ceremony. Kaleth followed behind him, Cirith at her side. She watched and could not look away. A squad of 8 soldiers ambushed them at a cargo bay. Danny pushed her behind a crate and told her to stay down. She watched through a gap in the containers as he fought. His movements were efficient, economical, no wasted motion, no wasted breath. He fired twice, moved, fired again, moved again. The soldiers could not track him. They shot at where he had been, never where he was. When the last soldier fell, Danny reloaded his weapon without looking down. His hands knew the motion by memory. Thousands of repetitions had burned it into his muscles. You were a soldier, Kaleth said. It was not a question. I was many things. Why did you never tell me? He looked at her then, and his face was tired. Not physically tired, but tired in a deeper way, as if his soul had been carrying a weight for too long. Because I wanted to stop being that person. I wanted to be someone who fixes things instead of breaking them. I wanted to believe the war was really over. He started moving again. She followed. They found survivors along the way. Crew members hiding in storage rooms. Wounded soldiers trying to hold defensive positions. Frightened children separated from their parents. Danny gathered them all. He gave orders in a voice that expected obedience and received it. He sent the civilians toward the secondary evacuation pods with armed escorts. He organized the scattered defenders into something resembling a fighting force. How do you know how to do this? Cirith asked quietly. 9 years, Danny said. 9 years in the Coalition Special Operations Division. I fought on 12 planets. I killed more Volanthi than I want to remember. He checked his weapons charge. I told myself when the war ended that I would never pick up a gun again. I promised myself I would build things, not destroy them. He looked down at the weapon in his hands. But some promises can't be kept. They reached the bridge after what felt like hours but was probably less than one. The ship's command center was a scene of horror. Dead humans lay at their stations. The captain had died at her chair. A plasma burn through her chest. The systems were failing, alarms still screaming their endless warnings. And Draxus was waiting. Kaleth's cousin stood at the center of the bridge, surrounded by his personal guard. 12 soldiers, the finest warriors in his fleet. He was taller than she remembered, and crueler. His silver skin glowed with the blue light of his armor. His eyes burned with fanatical certainty. "Cousin," Draxus said, spreading his arms wide. "You have led us on quite a chase. I expected the humans to hide you better than this." "I am not hiding," Kaleth replied. "I came to face you." Draxus laughed. "Such spirit. Perhaps there is true Valanthe blood in you after all. Unlike the pathetic creature you married." His eyes moved to Danny. "Ah. The human husband. I have heard you cause some trouble for my soldiers." "Very impressive, for a lesser being." Danny said nothing. He stood still, his weapons at his sides, his breathing calm and even. He was watching, calculating. Kaleth could almost see his mind working. Analyzing the positions of every soldier, measuring distances, planning movements. "Do you know how many honors I have earned in battle?" Draxus continued. 147 kills. 30 ships destroyed. I have led armies and conquered worlds. I am the greatest warrior of my generation. He stepped forward, drawing his plasma blade. The weapon hummed with deadly energy. "And you are an engineer from a corn farm." "Nebraska," Danny said quietly. "The farm was in Nebraska." Draxus sneered. "Do you have any last words, human? Any final message for your pathetic species?" Danny lifted his head. When he spoke, his voice was not loud, but it filled the room. "I don't want to fight you. I don't want to kill anyone. I came here to build a new life, to help build peace between our peoples. I wanted to believe we could be better than what we were during the war." He raised his weapon slowly. "But if you threaten my wife, if you threaten my people, if you think I will stand by while you murder innocent civilians." His eyes locked onto Draxus. "Then you will learn something about humans that your empire has never understood." 12 from. Also, and what is that? We don't fight because we love war. We fight because we love everything war threatens to take from us. And when we fight for what we love, Danny moved. Kaleth could not follow what happened next. It was too fast, too violent, too precise. Danny did not fight the 12 guards in sequence. He fought them all at once, flowing between them like wind through trees. He struck, dodged, struck again. Bodies fell. Weapons fired and missed. Armor cracked. In the span of perhaps 10 seconds, 12 elite Valanthe warriors lay on the ground. Only Draxus remained. The commander stared at Danny with something new in his eyes. Not anger, not contempt, fear. "What are you?" Draxus whispered. Danny walked toward him slowly. His armor was scorched in a dozen places. Blood dripped from a cut on his arm. But he did not stop. "I'm just a man who wanted to grow corn and fix machines and live in peace with his wife." He raised his weapon. "You should have let me." Draxus roared and charged, his plasma blade cutting through the air. He was fast. Faster than any Valanthe Kaleth had ever seen. Not fast enough. 3 shots rang out. Draxus's blade arm jerked and went limp, the weapon clattering to the floor. His knee exploded. He fell, screaming. Danny stood over him, weapon pointed at his head. "Surrender," Danny said. "Call off your ships. End this." Draxus looked up at him, broken and bleeding. All his pride stripped away. "I surrender," he whispered. Danny nodded slowly. He did not gloat. He did not celebrate. He simply turned away from the fallen commander and began working the ship's communication systems, coordinating the defense, saving what could be saved. Kaleth watched him and finally understood what she had married. The battle was over. The Valanthe ships that had followed Draxus were withdrawing, their commanders unwilling to continue the attack after their leader's surrender. Human reinforcements had arrived from nearby stations, and the Evergreen was being evacuated to safer territory. The dead were being counted. The wounded were being treated. The survivors were holding each other and crying. Kaleth sat in their quarters and waited. Danny had been working for hours, coordinating rescue efforts, helping repair damaged systems, carrying wounded to medical bays. Even now, covered in blood and exhaustion, he would not stop helping. Other crew members tried to make him rest, but he refused. There were people who needed him, Finally, long after the artificial night had fallen over the ship, he came home. He moved slowly now. The energy that had driven him through the battle was gone. He looked older than he had that morning, older than his years. He sat down at his workbench and began removing his armor piece by piece. The scarred metal told stories of battles she had never known about. Kaleth watched him in silence. When the armor was off, Danny sat in his simple clothes and stared at the wall. His hands shook slightly. She realized he was trying very hard not to cry. "How many?" she asked quietly. 47. His voice was rough. 47 of Draxus's soldiers. I killed 47 people today. They would have killed thousands. I know that. It doesn't make it easier. He pressed his palms against his eyes. It never makes it easier. She moved from her chair and sat beside him on the bench. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Why did you never tell me what you were?" she asked at last. "Why did you hide yourself?" Danny lowered his hands and looked at her. His eyes were red but dry. "Because I wasn't hiding. The person you married, the engineer who makes wooden birds and grows flowers and laughs at card games, that's who I really am. That's who I want to be." He gestured at the armor, piled on the floor. "This other thing, this warrior, this killer, I buried him when the war ended. I promised myself I would never let him out again. But you did. For me. For you. For the crew. For the children hiding in the corridors." He smiled sadly. "Humans are strange creatures, Kaleth. We can be soft and hard at the same time. We can love poetry and also know how to kill. We can spend our lives building things and still remember how to destroy. These are not contradictions for us. They are just what we are." She thought about this for a long time. She thought about the Valanthy way, the clean separation between warriors and workers, between those who fight and those who serve. Among her people, you chose your path and walked it forever. A warrior was always a warrior. A builder was always a builder. They did not change, but humans were different. Humans could be both. They could switch from one to the other in a heartbeat and then switch back again, never losing themselves in either role. Danny could carve delicate birds with the same hands that had ended 47 lives. He could mourn his enemies and go back to fixing water recyclers in the morning. "I called you weak," she said. "I said you were a nobody. I said the humans had insulted me by sending a farmer to marry a princess. I heard you, through the wall, 3 weeks ago." She closed her eyes. Shame washed through her like cold water. "I am sorry. I did not understand. You weren't wrong." Danny shrugged. "I am a farmer's son. I am an engineer. I am a nobody. From a small town that most humans have never heard of. But I'm also a man who held a corridor against 40 Valanthy soldiers for 6 hours so that 300 civilians could escape. I am a man who has killed more than I can count, and who still cries when he loses a patient in medical bay." He reached out and took her hand. "I am your husband. All of those things, all at once." His hand was warm. His grip was gentle. These were the same hands that had ended her cousin's soldiers with such terrible efficiency. "Among my people," Kaleth said slowly, "there is an old word. Vethkal. It means one who walks in shadow and light. It was used to describe the first Valanthy, the ones who lived before we divided ourselves into castes and roles. We thought they were primitive because they had not yet specialized. We thought evolution meant choosing one path and perfecting it. And now I think perhaps we lost something when we divided ourselves. Perhaps the primitive ones understood something we forgot." Danny squeezed her hand. "Maybe peace will help you remember." She looked at him. This small human who had changed everything she believed about his species. She had expected to marry a warrior and had been disappointed to receive an engineer. Now she understood that she had received both, wrapped in the same kind heart. "I think," she said slowly, "I am only now meeting my husband for the first time." Danny smiled. It was the same smile she had seen on their wedding day, warm and genuine and full of hope. But now she understood what lived behind it. The smile was not ignorance. It was choice. He had seen the worst of the universe and chosen to meet it with kindness anyway. "It's nice to meet you," he said. For the first time since their wedding, Kalith smiled back. Outside their window, the stars burned cold and bright. The galaxy still held dangers. There would be others like Draxus who rejected peace. There would be more battles to fight, more losses to mourn, more reasons to despair. But tonight, in this small room on a damaged ship, two people from different worlds had found something worth protecting. And Kalith had learned the secret that made humans so terrifying to their enemies. They did not fight because they loved violence. They fought because they loved everything else so much that they would become violence to protect it. Their gentleness was not weakness. It was the reason for their strength. She leaned against Danny's shoulder and listened to his heartbeat. Tomorrow there would be funerals. Tomorrow there would be grief and anger and difficult questions. Tomorrow the work of building peace would continue, harder now than before. But tonight, they rested. The wooden bird sat on the shelf, catching the starlight. A farmer's son from Nebraska and a princess of the Valanthe Empire sat together in comfortable silence. Outside, the stars kept their ancient watch, and somewhere in the distance, the universe held its breath, wondering what humans would do next.